Okay, G Cannon, you got it. Ryu. Gotta play against Ryu. Oh, who's gonna be doing the kicking? Let's see. Let's see. Wow, what a clever line. What a corny line to start, huh? Here we go. All right. Let's fire this one up. My opponent is typing hi, and that they have the stream muted. That is wonderful. That is perfect. All right. Knight f6. And what? King's Indian? No. I like, whenever I see this, I almost always just play d5 because I want to turn it into a queen pawn opening. Because this guy doesn't like to be obstructed in those situations. So this is a very, I don't think I'll have any problems now with my development. This is heading towards a very quiet opening, which is right up my alley, which is exactly what I would like to see. It's certainly my style compared to tactical, sharp variations. Does anybody know why that's the case? I don't know if I've shared that. I don't know if I should share that. Should I share that? Okay, let's get my knight. Do I want to break the pin? Let me just break the pin. I was thinking about knight b to d7, but I think I want to go with c5, knight c6. So this is where he belongs. And let's castle. I'm a lazy calculator. That's why I don't like sharp positions. I don't want to have to do some number crunching. Just take that. We just had with that exchange my bad bishop for my opponent's good bishop. And is it really necessary to keep the queen out of b5? If c5 is played, is the queen going to be annoying, hitting at both c5 and b7? I'm going to do it. I'm fine with it. Now c5. I'm more long-term seeing that this guy could turn out to be a problem. Soon enough, we'll have a rook being thrown on the c file. So these are gonna. This is a. These two moves, the c5, knight c6, they certainly go hand in hand. Let me just take that guy. My bishop is unprotected, but there aren't really any tactics. Let's jump my knight out here. My bishop gets hit. Okay, I'm gonna break the pin, and now with that last move, there's both c3 and c4 that I can look forward to maybe landing a piece on. If you could imagine the dark square bishops being exchanged and a rook maybe sinking itself in on that c3 square. I don't know that b4 is a move that could really be recommended. So what I might look to do now is, or even get a knight right there to c4 somehow. Boom, boom, boom. Welcome a dark square bishop exchange. As soon as I move my knight, there's tension between these guys, the bishops. So do I do rook c8? Or do I prevent something like knight a4? Because this knight, I'm pretty sure when you make that rook move, white's getting ready to move the knight and then just push this. The only white pawn that is really, I think, considered a liability on the white end. Do I do b5 and just clamp down on this square? I think I actually like that. I don't even want to give this knight. It's not about clamping down on this square right away, because like I could have done that a move later, but this move is coming with a time constraint. If I don't do b5 right away, the knight can make use of a4. Yes, I could still get in b4, but now I have to contend with the knight on c5, and I don't really want to do that. So this is not an inconvenience, this move, defending the knight. And now I could I could jump into this square, and maybe I should have looked into that first instead of the rook move, but I like this better. Attack that queen. There might be some tricky stuff with knight e4 if the queen goes to this square. This is going to be a problem now. This position reminds me of the black side of the Catalan, where black is trying to get in a c5 advance, but now it's the corresponding square c4. White's trying to get in the Catalan on the black side. Black's trying to get in c5, and in this position, white would really love to get this in, but that is a very long way off. Knight c4 would also come with tempo. Knight e4 trades a bunch. Actually, both knight moves, either c4 or e4, are threatening a fork. I'm just going to go with knight here right away. If I do h6, if the bishop goes here, then doing this is purposeful. But after h6 bishop here, my knight is hit. I'm just going to go here right away. I was considering h6 to try and get a little bit more out of the tension between these bishops before placing my knight in the center. The reason why I would want to do h6 is just for flight square for my king more long term, seeing how we do have all heavy pieces remaining, all major pieces. And now this is going to be a problem, I think. Now white is having to deal with a knight. If I really want to land a knight there, he's not going to be denied that square. Also, if there's one particular pawn break my opponent could maybe get in, it's a4. I'm just going to rule that out right away. A knight on the rim in this case is not so grim, actually. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Okay, this is the other pawn break that we might be seeing. So, positional, positional, positional. The other thing about this knight being on a4 is that if there's one square that I really don't want my opponent to be getting to with the knight, it's c5. So let's jump here. This is stopping this break. This is sniffing out any possibility of a knight landing on c5 and sitting there for any amount of time. My other knight could sink in here. How do I make further progress? Queen b6 seems all the more appealing, not only because opposite the king, but hang on, just take with my queen. Does it really matter? Yeah, I'm gonna take with my bishop. Okay, I'm gonna play here. This is weakened. What I was gonna say is this is appealing because it's opposite the king, and also because that f-pawn moved. This is just a more weakened point. So I think I have a very clear plan right now, and that is to just pile up on that c3 pawn. But to be honest, I want my bishop in a better location first, and I think this is a good spot. Pressure on the knight. Time to double up. Maybe I should have just jumped right in here. My opponent is moving very quick. Flight square for my king. There is no rush here. Let's expand over here. I might want to clamp down on this structure, and I have just that. Okay, and now I'm going to transfer my attention, bump my king up, and I can play on both sides of the board now. I can use my better flexibility, I guess, with pinpointing the weakest link. I think the weakest link is now h3. I mean, this guy's pretty weak on c3, but I'm gonna target h3. I think white was maybe acting too quickly with those pawn advances, and one little slip up can really now present yourself with a new target. And h3 is it. Okay, now that's dropping the pawn. That's what I was talking about earlier, about my knight on a4 watching over for c5. If that move didn't come about, I was thinking about rerouting my knight here. Now I could take like this. This is a pin. Can't have pawn takes. Has to go like this, or with the queen. I could pick up another pawn. This is weak. These guys are both weakened. That pawn is now hit twice. And I'm going to come back to d6 to hit this pawn. And I could start pushing my a pawn as well. Okay, this is definitely crumbling now. There is most likely no good defense here. I'm just going to come back, have my queen guard everything on this side of the board. Stop any dark square checks. Queen ending. This is a passed pawn. Get rolling. I just want to make sure that there are no discovered tricks. I have possibilities for a discovered check against their king, and they might have it too with being opposite my queen. Even with time, this pawn is very fast. Maybe I shouldn't have given up that pawn, but okay. They didn't take on a5. Keep pushing. My queen wants to be on c2. Even if I have to give up a pawn just to get the queens off, that's quite alright. For example, here next, if the king played to d2, I'd probably still play here. King and pawn endgame is winning. There are no possibilities, as far as I'm seeing, for a perpetual check. And now my king could sneak in. Oh, they didn't go after that pawn. Okay, they resigned. Good game, G Cannon. Let's back up. I'm going to flip that board and look at things from your perspective. My opponent is saying, thank you for the game. You are welcome. So, my first suggestion is, and I had this, I think, on the last stream I did. I was talking about how you really shouldn't obstruct your c-pawns with your knights if it's a queen-pawn opening. And then somebody came back and said, well, there's you can do that in the Black Mardemer. And that's true. Like in this position right here, you could do something with the e4 takes followed up with f3, but if you're not going to run forward with that, I would really discourage going with knight c3 here. Queen pawn like opening, c-pawn wants to do one of two things. A, defend your own center, or B, strike at my center. And he didn't have that ability for really the whole game. This turned out to be your first weakness, and then there were other ones later that came about with that h-pawn, but this is the main thing. Piece placement. The other thing that you can maybe try for before I even get in c5, when I'm doing this a6 move, which is not a developing move, it's strictly preventative, keeping pieces out of b5, maybe you can be looking into this e4 advance. Press forward in the center, and I'll probably be giving up the center because I don't know if I'm really too happy about, or I don't know if I would really want to allow this e5 advance, gaining space. So I think maybe looking into e4. If you did e4 right here, e4, I believe I takes, knight takes. There might be something a little bit tricky, because if I take the bishop, maybe you have knight takes f, and you're on my queen. I don't know. I was thinking about that. I mean, if you really do want to get an e4, you could always take out my knight and then push. Maybe that's not so bad. Take my knight, I recapture, push forward in the center. And another thing I'm wondering is, since you have not yet committed your king, is it a possibility to maybe castle queenside and maybe get pushing your g-pawn and h-pawn? I don't know. It's an interesting possibility if you haven't committed your king. So anyhow, possibility for an e4 push in short. That did not happen, and now this becomes very awkward, your c-pawn. You definitely, if a3 is made to keep out a piece from this square and that alone, okay, maybe I could see that. But if you're doing a3 to get in b4, you have to shy away from that. These two squares are too weakened now, too difficult, and this is, you're fighting a very, very uphill battle, without a doubt. That's the main point here. It's just a matter of me pouncing on these squares, and I don't know that I really gave you a window of opportunity. I don't know if there's a way to really get out. I did have some slight fear at this point about maybe a pawn push in the center, taking advantage maybe of my queen being opposite your rook. Not so sure though that would work. But once that came about, yes, you're shutting down my bishop here, but these squares are just too much to overcome. I would also recommend on this side, once we do get to this point, don't be too quick. Don't be so quick to move this pawn. In fact, one thing you should be considering is stopping me from playing h4 to clamp down on the h and g pawns. So if anything, instead of a king move, and maybe it was a mouse slip, but look into g3, getting ready to meet h4 with g4, and at least this side of the board is not opening up. You're strictly defensive right here, and these rooks are pretty much without a move. They can't. There's no like tempo moves that you could just shuffle back and forth and still defend c3. So maybe be a little bit more patient, but I believe we were pretty much in bullet mode at that point, weren't we? Yeah, that's the last thing really. Can't go with that a3 b4 move, and really as far back as the earliest point in the game, the idea of knight c3. Don't obstruct that c pawn.